I have known words to be weapons and wings. In the quiet of a southern night and the hum of a city street, words have stood up when bodies were too tired to move. They have spoken when mouths were shut by fear or force. I have seen words rise slow and steady like smoke from the fire of injustice. When the world turned its back on the weary and the worn, it was words that held them, rocked them, reminded them they were still human. You see, language is no luxury, it is necessity, it is survival. It is the tool of the oppressed when every other tool has been taken. It is the scream in the dark that says, I am still here. It is the whisper in a child's ear that says, you are worthy. From the plantations to the protests, from the back alleys of the South to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, our words have marched ahead of our feet, preparing the ground for justice to follow. There are those who think poetry is soft, who think literature lives in libraries and not in the real world. But I have known poems that stop bullets, not by shielding the body, but by changing the mind that would fire the gun. I have known books that broke down bars, not of iron, but of ignorance. I have seen stories carry a people through pain, reminding them of where they came from, what they survived, and who they still are. When they tried to bury our truth, we wrote it on paper and passed it hand to hand like gospel. When they told us to be silent, we spoke louder in metaphors and rhythm and rhyme. When they laughed at our grammar, we reminded them that soul speaks its own dialect and dignity never needed permission. I have stood in rooms where my voice was the only one of my kind. I have felt the weight of judgment hang thick in the air. But when I spoke, when I dared to open my mouth and let loose the thunder of truth, I watched eyes widen, backs straighten, silence turn sacred. Because there is something undeniable about honesty, something magnetic in clarity, something defiant in beauty. When I spoke, I did not just share words. I claimed space. I reclaimed time. I demanded to be seen. And protest, oh yes, protest does not always come with fists raised. Sometimes it comes with pens pressed. Sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is tell her story. Sometimes the most powerful resistance is to write yourself whole. I have known Black girls whose lives were saved by poems. I have known elders who found peace in telling their truth before the end. I have known artists who painted our pain in syllables and found healing in the process. To speak in a world that tries to mute you is to protest. To write in a world that tries to erase you is to rebel. There is no act more intimate, more daring than telling the truth and wrapping it in beauty. It is an act of faith to believe that someone somewhere will read your words and remember that they are not alone, that they are not crazy, that they are not invisible. It is an act of war against silence, and it is an act of love for the future. So I did not write because I wanted fame. I did not write to be applauded. I wrote because there was too much inside me not to. I wrote because my silence had become too loud. I wrote because every time I opened my notebook, I remembered my people. I remembered the ones who never got the chance. The ones who died with songs still stuck in their throats. The ones whose names were never written down, whose faces never graced covers, but whose spirits move in every line I laid down. And I've seen the world shift, not always quickly, not always kindly, but shift nonetheless. I have seen hearts soften and spines strengthen because of a story, a speech, a stanza. I have seen children find themselves in words I wrote long before they were born. I have seen people stand taller just knowing someone else had felt what they feel, fought what they fight, lived through what they're living. And that is the magic of language. That is the power of protest. It is not always loud. It is not always in the streets. Sometimes it is a single voice speaking truth in a room full of lies. Sometimes it is a single line that lifts a soul up off the floor. Sometimes it is the quiet conviction of a woman with a pen who refuses to be erased. I have known the weight of oppression, how it drapes over your shoulders like a wet cloak, how it seeps into your skin until you forget the feel of sunlight. It is not just the chains that bind your body, but the ones that wind their way around your spirit. The ones that whisper, you are less than, that follow you down every hallway, that echo in the silence of being overlooked. Oppression is not only what is done to you, it is also what they try to make you do to yourself. Doubt your beauty, question your brilliance, shrink your power. But I have also known the miracle of rising, not with fury alone, but with grace. The kind of grace that does not need permission. The kind that comes from knowing who you are, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. I have watched women walk through fire and emerge not as ash, but as flame. I have seen boys grow up in the shadows of poverty, racism, violence, and still walk with dignity, as if they carried their ancestors' hopes in their very posture. And maybe they do. Maybe that is why we cannot be crushed. Because we are not just who we are who came before. We rise because we have been pushed down too many times to forget how to get up. We rise because grace is in our bones, not a quiet, delicate grace, but a mighty one. A grace that demands recognition, that commands attention, that speaks in a voice full of thunder and memory. There is a lie they tell, that to survive you must become bitter, that to resist you must be hard. But I have known resistance that sings lullabies. I have known survival that smells like shea butter and cornbread and Saturday morning laughter. There is a strength and softness, a courage and compassion, a revolution in refusing to become what tried to break you. And grace, true grace, is choosing to carry your scars with pride, not to hide them. To say, yes, I have suffered, but I am not my suffering. That is power. They built systems meant to erase us. Laws, borders, walls, lies. They thought if they could keep us hungry long enough, scared long enough, ashamed long enough, we would forget. But we remembered. We remembered the songs sung under breath in the fields. We remembered the stories told by candlelight in the backs of buses and basements and beauty shops. We remembered how to dream, and not just dream, but create. Create poems out of pain, paint masterpieces out of mourning. Build beauty in the places they said we didn't belong. That is grace. It takes grace to love yourself in a world that tells you not to look in the mirror and say, I am enough. Even when the advertisements, the textbooks, the headlines, and sometimes even your own teachers say otherwise. It takes grace to forgive, not because the world deserves it, but because you do, because you deserve the peace that comes with letting go. Grace does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means standing tall in your truth and not letting that truth poison you. It means walking through this world with open hands instead of clenched fists, not because you are weak, but because you are free. Oppression wants you to forget your own name. Grace reminds you. Oppression wants you to be silent. Grace gives you a voice and a platform. Wants you to become invisible. Grace teaches you how to shine. And I have seen it happen. I have seen young people, broken by the world, step into a space of healing and begin to rise, not quickly, not all at once, but steadily, with each breath, each word, each act of self-love. That is rising with grace. It is not always pretty. It is not always polished. Sometimes it is messy. Sometimes it is rage and weeping and trembling hands. But it is rising nonetheless. There are those who will never understand this grace. They mistake it for weakness. They think if you're not shouting, you must not be strong. But they don't see the discipline it takes to keep choosing joy. They don't know the strength it takes to be soft in a hard world. They don't realize that our grace is what has kept us alive. It is not an accident. It is a strategy. It is a legacy. It is a truth passed down through lullabies and sermons and protest songs. It is the way our grandmothers taught us to hold our heads high, even when our backs were bent from work. It is the way our fathers walked out the door each day, knowing the world outside saw them as threats, but still carried love in their eyes. To rise with grace is to know your worth is not defined by anyone else. It is to understand that your humanity is not up for debate. It is to reclaim your time, your name, your space, your voice. It is to know that dignity is not something that can be given to you. It is something you carry, something you polish with every step, every poem, every act of truth. And when you rise this way, when you rise not just in defiance, but in dignity, you do more than survive, you inspire. You open the door for others to follow. You become a light that refuses to dim. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet refusal. A decision made in the gut before the mouth can even form the words. It is a woman rising from her seat when told to move. It is a man opening his mouth to speak truth in a room that trembles under the weight of denial. Courage has worn the face of every color, has walked barefoot across hot soil, and sat behind cold bars. But when I speak of legacy, of the bloodline of bravery, I am not talking only of the dramatic moments that history books remember. I am talking about the daily defiance, the way our people loved themselves in a world that told them they were unlovable, the way we raised our children to believe they were kings and queens when the headlines said otherwise. Radical love is not the stuff of fairy tales. It is not sweetened for easy consumption. Radical love demands something of you. It demands that you see the humanity in those who have stripped you of yours. It calls you to reach back and lift someone else even when your own hands are tired. It is the kind of love that will not let a community fall into despair, that builds gardens in concrete, that sings lullabies over the wailing of injustice. It is the woman who opens her door to feed a hungry child that is not her own. It is the elder who teaches the young the names of those who marched before, not to burden them, but to prepare them. This love does not shrink in the face of hate. It expands. It wraps itself around pain like a bomb. It is fierce and firm and rooted. I have known love that stared down police dogs and fire hoses. Love that marched through Selma and stood on balconies in Memphis. Love that watched a friend be lynched and still chose not to hate. That kind of love is not passive. It is not weak. It is the strongest thing I know. Because to love in the face of cruelty, to still choose community, connection, and care, that is a revolution. That is the heartbeat of every movement that ever mattered. That is the soul of the struggle. The legacy we carry is not built on comfort. It was built in cotton fields and kitchens, on bus steps and jail cells. It was shaped by mothers who kissed their sons goodbye, not knowing if they'd return. By fathers who worked jobs that broke their backs but refused to let it break their spirits. This legacy is heavy, but it is holy. It is sacred. It is woven into our laughter, our language, our very bones. And every time we choose love over hate, every time we show up when it's easier to stay home, every time we remember those who came before, we honor it. Do not mistake this love for tolerance. It is not about letting injustice pass unchecked. Radical love holds accountable. That shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort is a slow form of death. And we were born to live. We were born to be whole, not palatable. Bold, not apologetic. They try to convince us that our beauty was less than, that our hair had to be tamed, that our names had to be changed, that our accents were wrong. But when you carry yourself with the full weight of your own truth, you rewrite those rules. You teach the world how to see you by how you see yourself. And when you do that, you give permission to others. You become a mirror for those who have forgotten their own reflection. You become a light in the dark. Our identity has always been our protest. In every era, in every movement, we have asserted ourselves not only with our fists, but with our being. There is a reason why the oppressed are always told to forget who they are, because to know your name, your history, your strength, is to be dangerous. It is to be ungovernable. It is to be powerful in a way that cannot be measured by dollars or degrees. But none of them ever define me, because who I am is deeper than the boxes others build. I am not defined by their fear or their misunderstanding. I am not confined by their limits. I am the sum of stories told in kitchens, of prayers whispered in the dark, of dreams kept alive when everything else was taken. My identity is not a costume I take off when it is inconvenient. It is not a performance. It is the truth of my existence. And when I speak it, when I live it, unashamed and unaltered, I am doing more than just surviving. I am claiming space. I am planting flags. There are those who will try to make you believe that being fully yourself is too much, that you must soften your edges, lower your voice, dilute your passion. In the silence of isolation, it reminds you that you belong. In the noise of injustice, it roots you in clarity. It tells you that you are not lost, not invisible, not wrong, that you are the answer to 1,000 prayers, that your presence is proof of survival. That your being is a bridge between what was and what can be. They can try to erase the records, but they cannot erase the rhythm in your walk, the fire in your speech, the knowing in your eyes. They cannot take what you refuse to surrender. And that refusal, that holy, stubborn refusal, is triumph. It is not the kind of triumph that always makes headlines. Sometimes it is quiet. A child learning their own history for the first time. A woman walking into a room without shrinking. A man loving himself in a world that told him not to. These are not small things. They are sacred. They are the proof that identity, when claimed fully and lived fiercely, is both resistance and victory.